These are the cognitive tasks, attention, working memory, episodic memory, psychomotor performance. They didn't have a task for listening to what your wife tells you to do, which a lot of women would really like. But so far, there's never been a medicine found for that. Next. And there's good, again, statistically significant evidence for the value of this agent, Pycnogenol, in improving working memory, decreasing concentrations of F2 isoprostane, which is the marker for free radical production. Next. And so I think it's a very good product, and when I've read all the research on that, I take that every day. And I know it's pricey, but I think when you finally find things that work, it's worth taking. This idea of the blood pressure and tolerating elevations just doesn't make sense, because the literature is so compelling about the value of control that it's really frustrating. I know people come in all the time, it was lower at home, or I'm nervous and all this stuff, but in the end, it just wears your blood vessels down and hurts your brain and hurts your kidneys and hurts your heart. And we have such wonderful meds at this point in time. Certainly you can do other things. I tell people, the first two things is three things. If you can reduce calories and lose fat, I don't want you to lose muscle, but lose the fat, particularly the fat in your abdominal and your abdomen. If you can reduce your salt intake, because about a third of us are salt sensitive. And for some of us, it's the alcohol. And you just got to drink less or avoid it if you can't drink less. Each 10% increase in diastolic blood pressure was associated with a significant 7% increase in the odds of cognitive impairment. I mean, there's no other single thing we can do to help our brains. Next. From a medical point of view, blood sugar metabolism, all the markers for metabolic dysfunction are associated with brain volume, loss of brain volume, and cognition. And these include elevated fasting insulin levels, which is why I check them, elevated fasting glucose, and even small amounts of elevation are significant, and insulin resistance, which we can measure. Next. Again, people with these biomarkers had a decreased cerebral brain volume equal to 6 years of additional brain aging. These changes were seen in pre-diabetics as well as people with overt diabetes. So when we say you have a little bit of elevation in blood sugar and take it seriously, I take it seriously. I try to get people to change. We have the first-line therapy program. We have the medical gym. We try to get, this is the reason. It really is, with all the concern about healthcare costs, it's attention to these simple issues that will create value to the system in the next 2 decades, 3 decades. Next. There's an inverse correlation between executive function and diabetes, fasting glucose, hemoglobin A1C, fasting insulin, and insulin resistance in patients with and without diabetes. And the same with memory. Next. Okay, so brain health and mitochondria. In mitochondria, the little organelles within our cells that produce energy most efficiently. And, they do it via this Krebs cycle, and ATP is the currency of energy. If we're effective in manufacturing it with oxygen, we're healthy, and as we lose the ability to manufacture it via the mitochondria, utilizing oxygen, we use alternative pathways that produce more acidity and make you feel achy and cruddy. And we would like the alternative pathway is probably a more primitive pathway, because as many as you know, it seems as if the mitochondria have different DNA than our nuclear DNA, and the thought is that somehow in primitive organisms that had the older, less efficient form of energy production, a small, let's say, bacterium lived within them symbiotically, and it worked out to make a successful animal. Eventually we came along now and may prove the model wrong, but you know, all the mitochondrial DNA, that DNA all comes from the mother, and there's none from the guys. Why? The sperm is trying to get to the egg, right? And it takes a ton of energy to get there. It's burnt itself out. It's got nothing to give except the nuclear DNA. So we're all saddled with our mother's mitochondrial DNA, for better or worse.
I get it. Another blame for the mother, right?
Something else to blame on the mother. And again, you know, everything is kind of circular. So the price for efficient energy production is increased production of these reactive oxygen species or free radicals. And they're injurious to cellular protein and fat, and they ultimately injure the integrity of the cell. Next. And so cumulative oxygen injuries to these mitochondria triggered by endogenous metabolic processes and/or exogenous oxidative influences. They injure the mitochondria, we get tired, and we say, oh, I'm getting old. Next. And it's a circular thing, because as the mitochondria become less efficient, we make more of these reactive oxygen species. So we've got to try to interrupt that process. Next. And the proteins and the fat of the cells are injured, mutations accumulate, along with malfunctioning molecules and cell toxins, and eventually the cell is either crippled, killed outright, etc. Maybe that's a repeat, I don't know. Did you hit the right button? So it's estimated that when mitochondria work optimally, they convert up to 95% of the oxygen they handle to water. The remaining 5% is converted to these reactive oxygen species. And that's manageable. But when there's a loss of the oxidative efficiency, more and more reactive oxygen species are made, and hence this slow process of injury. Next. So the cell accumulates these toxic materials and becomes less efficient. Hence, more reactive oxygen species, more cellular injury, hence less efficiency. Next. These are agents that seem to help counter neurodegeneration. The vitamins, thiamine, riboflavin, nicotinamide, pantothenic acid, pyridoxine, and biotin. Next. And this is a study that looked at the use of these vitamins to moderate stage, late stage Alzheimer's disease. It was a placebo-controlled pilot study. Next. And they were truly randomly assigned, and they received a formula that had folic acid, B6, vitamin E, SAMe, and acetylcysteine and acetyl-L-carnitine. And they did